Unmuted?
Yeah.
All right.
Here, wait. You want me to test the sound on Zoom?
Yep, we should be ready to go. I'm gonna, where is the mouse? Where's the mouse? Baseline. All right, the first of our afternoon presenters is Jason Heaton, who we are all set up for, right? So you want to come on up and, again, in theory, and I know we're light in our numbers. I'm imagining people will come back from lunch, but we'll keep ourselves on track. And so take it away. We can put the lights down a little bit too.
Do you need to do a test or anything first, or is it
No, I think
ready to go?
that's too. Okay, there we go. Is the sound coming out all right?
Check, test.
Yeah, it's good.
Sounds great. Hi, everybody.
Thank you.
All right, my name is Jason Heaton. I'm the Director of Astronomy at the Boonshock Museum of Discovery. I've been there for the past 27 years, and I'm meeting some of you for the first time, so that's great. I've heard a lot of your names, and thank you for accommodating me today. As you may know, the Dayton Society of Natural History operates both the Boonshock Museum as well as the Sunwatch Indian Village, as you see there. The picture on the left is just from about a week ago, where we had our first opportunity to talk to the International Space Station. So you may have heard that a Dayton native, Larry Connor, was on the International Space Station, and he talked to us live in the planetarium. So I'm here today to, my coworker, Joe Craig, said this might be an appropriate place to get some feedback and see if this presentation had any substance. So I'm looking to the experts, all of you in this room, to give me advice. That's what I'm here for, is hopefully for some help. It's titled The Astronomical Investigation into the Functionality of Stone Gorgets, but really it's just a comparison to sundials of the same time period. So my background being in astronomy, I've noticed I was worried I didn't know to what extent everybody here was comfortable with astronomical alignments, and I figure in the Ohio region it's just a kind of given now, right? I would imagine it's pretty basic to say that that they were measuring time in one fashion or another. So I looked and saw some different gorgets in our collections, and I wanted to present them here and see, ask for feedback. So this particular one is, this slide is just a sundial. When you think of a sundial, this might be the image that comes up in your head, a circular piece like that with the gnomon, the shadow casting device, set at the latitude of where you are on the Earth. Here we're in Columbus, it's like 39, 40 degrees. Whether you're in Northern Ohio or Southern Ohio, it's pretty much just a couple of degrees difference. But there are as many sundials as there are people to think up of ways of measuring the sun. So you see a cylindrical sundial, a Roman portable sundial, I'll come back to that, and a wood carving of just somebody using a stick. And so the stick is casting a shadow on his hand. If you look close, you'll see numbers there. So he's counting hours before and after noon. But no matter what kind of sundial you have, they all work in the same fashion. Any stick in the ground, any tree stump is going to cast the same shadow over the course of the year. I brought my own laser here. So I'm talking about like the tip of the shadow here will carve out the same pattern, and it doesn't stop there, it extends on. But you get the idea. This is what first drew my attention to it when Jill introduced me to some of our collections instruments. I noticed that even the circular sundial works off the same premise. It carves off a certain pattern in the year. And I'll come back to this as the sun as a clock and a compass and a calendar. This is, and I tested all three of these during the course of this, so I'd like to show you some of that. Welcome, everybody. I'm back. So first, I'm going to show you a comparison to Pompeii horizontal sundial, which was part of an exhibit at the New York University. This is an actual device that was found, and you use the cone, a little cone for a gnomon, and it casts a specific shadow. So on the shortest day of the year, the winter solstice, this is the shadow path. And then on the equal days of the year, you've got the spring and the fall. It casts more of a straight line, and it's not always exact, but more of a straight line. If I were to pause this, you could say, okay, the shadow's right there. It's noon on either March 21st or so forth. And then finally on the spring, the longest day of the year, the summer solstice, it takes the opposite direction. So this biconcave structure of the shadow of an object is what originally I thought was worth exploring and my coworker Jill said, sure, so we got out some of these gorgets, we looked at them. I was specifically drawn to the biconcave or quadriconcave designs, and especially among those, anything that had some sort of engraving. Look for enough engravings, you might find some sort of a pattern. And but in our collection, we only have a certain amount of numbers. So we have of these different gorges and pendants. We have about 150 total, and I was looking for either heavily engraved ones or biconcave structure ones. Of these, say, 150 that we have, there's just about 11 with some engraving, and they come in all shapes and sizes, so it's hard to find patterns there if there are not. There are a small number of the biconcave ones. So I turned, Jill suggested, my coworker, that I turn to the Ohio Archaeologist publication. And there are plenty of them online. So I was able to peruse through that publication way back to the mid-60s and increase the sample size quite a bit. You see there are biconcave, but all manner of different kinds. And during that time period, when I was reading through all of these, I saw that Dr. Romaine had pitched the idea of the Adena tablet, the Cincinnati tablet seen here, as possible containing calendric information. And that's a really good article, and I talked to him about it, and I said, have you ever had any feedback? He said I was the first person to ask him about it. So that's exciting. The Cincinnati people are here, correct, today? I was hoping to talk to just some people because this is housed in that area. While I was looking through Ohio Archaeologist and some online, I know you have to shy away from online collections. I noticed that in some pieces, and there are more than a few here, it was the negative space that caught my eye. So there's a heavily engraved area, which your eye is drawn to, but the negative space is in that biconcave shape, and there seem to be some light engravings. So I was looking at now, instead of just looking at the 6 or 7 biconcave gorgets we had, you could increase the sample size by looking at pendants and gorgets as well, if they had this kind of shape. If you look for something, sure enough, you'll probably find it. So over on the left, you see a keyhole trapezoidal, and here's an example of one of those where, sure enough, the shape I'm looking at is heavily engraved, whereas the rest of it might not be. And again, there are multiple examples. I'm just showing you one here. So it does seem like that shape may be important. So what would you look for? If you're going to look for a pendant or a gorget, and it has some engravings, you'd be looking for some kind of a line that would denote passage of time. Obviously, whoever's living here might not be measuring time with months or weeks, but some sort of line element is what I was looking for, and possibly this logarithmic kind of pattern. So you see it moves faster from mid-April to mid-February. And yeah, again, you can find some examples of such a thing. I'm not so sure about these, but there were lines etched in the one on the left, and possibly a highly stylized version on the upper right. And then this particular piece had some really interesting lines that might fall into that kind of pattern, but this is all I have. So as far as sample size goes, it's a still picture from the internet. I wasn't sure about this. What I looked for, what I found much more of course, are tally marks. And in many cases, the tally marks on the edge seem to correspond to engraved lines coming off of it. So it's possible that these could be used for the measurement of time, but how would you use such a device? Well, I'm going to continue on. This is a Dayton Society piece with the front side is on the left and the upside down side is on the right there, and you do see some tally marks over on that edge, and they're kind of latitude lines, but I wasn't sure how this would work. So I kept looking, because what if you were going to measure, instead of weeks, or time periods, what if you measured time intervals through the day, such as hours? Well, you would expect to see some sort of gnomon or some kind of shadow casting device that was off of it with lines radiating out from the center. And here, there were a few. So even in one of our pieces at the Dayton Society, I've drawn lines on the right so that you can see the lines radiating from something, possibly an offset gnomon that was used to cast a shadow onto a die. Big if, but still, there are examples of this. There are more examples. This is a glacial came style, and then this one has that area, and on that left side, it appears to be one kind of measurement. On the right side, possibly a different type of measurement. I've extended lines again to where they might be, where they might converge. And just one other example. It may be that the interpretation of these objects is kind of difficult because there's so many lines and they don't seem to fall into any specific pattern. But it may also be that there are 2 or 3 patterns of measurement. So I would interpret this as you're measuring possibly weeks over time and maybe an hourly, because right there where the lines emanate or radiate from the hole, that's of extreme interest. There are lots of examples of that. So while I was looking for something, you see many more of these. In this piece down here on the left, you can kind of just barely see them. And again, this is a Dayton Society piece, and I would never have seen them were I not for been able to take some high-resolution pictures with really good lighting. And then you see the lines emanating from the hole, indicating possibly something actually placed in the hole. Many of these gorgets pendants are found, correct, right? They're found as wearable objects. So I still don't know, but you add those two together. You add your hours and your weeks together, and you get this cross-hatching pattern. If you find an engraved gorget or pendant, I've looked at many now, you're going to find this crosshatch pattern anywhere from Maryland to Tennessee, and especially in Ohio. This crosshatch pattern may have something to do with this. So I decided to test some by making some copies. And this is how you know I've overlaid how we tell time on the left, and how you might use this on the right. Interestingly, I thought a shell gnomon might be appropriate, and I bought that at the fair at New Boston. So I was interested when I heard that today. I was like, hey, that's where I got that little shell. And I still have it. It broke, though, so I'm using a glue stick over here instead. So my shell broke halfway. But either way, this is one way you could actually use it to tell time. You put, and I did on the winter solstice last year, and about 90 minutes before sunset, it's marking this location. And you read it over here, and you see that's about where you would expect to see it on December 21st, right before sunset. Same thing, this was a few days ago, and this time it's around noon, and that's where you would expect to see a shadow from a similar sized object. So that's one way you could use it. Now, these lines that radiate away from a hole I thought were very interesting because I'd seen this before. The Roman portable sundials, that's the one on the left, that's a recreation, and all you're doing here is you've got a hole for your gnomon, which you put in at the appropriate month. And then you measure hours before or after noon, so 3 hours after noon or 2 hours before noon. That's clearly labeled as a sundial. It's easy to determine if you find that somewhere that one is a sundial. But I wanted to include this one because it's kind of fun, and also it has a resemblance to Ohio gorgets. So this is called the ham sundial, or the ham dial as they call it. And the gnomon was a pig's tail, and it was shaped like a piece of ham. And you could see here that it works pretty well. You align, in this case, and there are many ways to use these, in this case you align it to your certain month and you read hours before or after sunset. Now it's not labeled. There are no numbers on it. So this is harder to identify as a sundial, but it greatly resembles some of the pieces that are found here, where you see lines radiating from a hole, and here's some more. So here are a few more. You've got the lines coming from the central hole, and they do appear to be in sort of a logarithmic pattern. What I mean is you would expect to be shorter lines closer to noon and longer lines farther away from noon. It's certainly possible. What would you, if there was a gnomon, if there was a shadow casting device, what would it be? Well, there are plenty of archaeological artifacts that might be, placed in a hole like that, but I gravitated originally toward cones because the Pompeii horizontal sundial on the upper left was what they used for that one. And there were a couple of cases where a clay cone, or what do you guys call these? There's a name for these cones, the artifacts, I don't know, that are found here in Ohio. I forget. And then there's at least one example of a cone being found near a very famous gorget, and those were the only two artifacts found with a specific burial. And this is called one of the Adena tablets called the Lacan A tablet, I believe. And there's a clay cone found with that one, as well as a number of different objects too. Possible, but in the end, I took the engraved pieces to study them, and I made some examples. So these are clay examples where I tried to recreate the lines to go and test it out. This particular piece didn't seem to yield much information. If it was you could, what I'm saying is you certainly could use this to tell time. So you point this at the sun, and you see your shadow here, and it's a little longer here. That one is not as convincing, but I kind of liked it. This particular one is, here's the artifact, here's my shell gnomon, and then you see it's casting a line. I tried to recreate the lines here, and I'm turning it flat. I found it was extremely important to hold something flat when you're using these, if you were. Finally, I tested it out as how it might be used as a clock. How am I doing in time? Okay, and how it might be used as
7 minutes.
Okay, how it might be used as a calendar. I wanted to show you that this is an old Boy Scout trick for finding your directions outside. Take any stick and you put it in the ground and you measure the path, and you're going to get some kind of a curve. And then you bisect that line and you get pure east-west, and you make a perpendicular line that's north-south. Now this is very well, like even a compass in your pocket is going to show you magnetic north. This will show you exact northwest, east and south. And so I did a few tests to see exactly how long of a stick would make a good measurement. Over here, I've got just like a yardstick, something about the size of my arm, in the Boonshoft parking lot. And this is the Sunwatch Indian Village's red cedar center pole. And seeing if that, I marked it every half an hour. And while doing this test, I found out it was extremely cloudy that day, but you were still able to make measurements. If you know where the sun is and you align it with the top of the. So I did cones and found my directions, and sure enough, they worked pretty well. This was last summer. Last summer, I used a yardstick as a gnomon, placed it in the dirt, and I check marked here, and you can see I used just a printout of the Cincinnati Adena tablet right here. And you can see it matches the curve pretty well. And also, this is a very effective way to use it. So I don't know if this was how it was used, but it could be used, and very efficiently, to find your directions. So instead of waiting a half an hour or an hour for the shadow of something to cross a certain path, one of these devices, you can see it was just about 8 minutes before I had a really good read of directions. Finally, this was the last test I did just a few days ago. Anybody could do this. If you want to try this yourself, you can. Put a stick in the ground. I found that first gnomon was like something the size of your arm, and that'll give you a good read. So I lined up some rocks here, and you see that down there. And then I know my directions. You can line up an instrument with that. This is just a cardboard cutout this time, but it's got the biconcave structure. A second gnomon will give you a precise time of day and possibly calendar. So overlaying our method of timekeeping on top of it, it shows that, in fact, April 17th around 5 o'clock is when I took this picture. I just included the EXIF data from my phone so that you can see that's actually when I did this test. So I don't know if these, I felt this was the appropriate form because I don't know if there's substance to this. I don't know if they were used like this, but you could use them like this. And if you did, it would be very effective. Also, these patterns go back a lot farther than the Hopewell or the Adena. You see some of these same patterns in glacial came, sandal, soul gorgets. So you can see the biconcave structure. These are wear holes here, so possibly something was put through these two, but not in this particular one. This is from somebody else's paper, and you see the same kind of structures and possibly a gnomon hole. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that you know that they're measuring time in some fashion. A number of these engraved pieces show pattern you would expect to see if it might be being used as a sundial, and many of these resemble greatly devices found in Europe about the same time period, so the Pompeii time period, and simple reproductions could be used to show the different time of day, even your directions, in about 6 or 7 minutes. So you could use these. What I need is advice from you for next steps. This is very, very early research, and I'd also, the sample size I've been using to look at these is mostly the internet and the 150 so pieces at the Dayton Society. So any recommendations would be great. I defer to you, the experts, and I want to say thank you for having me today, and I really appreciate the time. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much. All right, Jamie, can you change out the view on that? And then we'll come down. Kevin, I might need your help for a very quick moment. When we have this in presenter mode, this is actually what's streaming out right now on, we may just need to go to regular mode, so you may not be able to see your next upcoming slide, but can see the slide itself.
Okay.
Like, I don't often work in this mode, so. Maybe the next paper up, but and I think I just pulled up his paper, right? It's right here, as long as I can just take it off of that presenter mode. All right, thank you. I never do that, so. All right, I think we're ready. Our next presenter this afternoon is Glenwood Boatman. I'm gonna get your slides up and ready. Oh, but now we have the opposite problem. Why is that here? Oh. Hold on one moment and then we'll get it. Yeah, we may have to, oh, what'd you do there?
Not correct. Right?
Yeah, go ahead and see from the beginning.
What? Now it's changing.
Yeah, hold on one moment. We may have to go back to how we did it before. Hold
Wait,
on.
wait.
That was in presenter view. Try it now.
Just run it as a slideshow.
Yeah, it just, there we go.
Then it still picks that up.
It's fine.
Wait.
It'll have to be that way. Hold on, go back to that for just a minute, Jamie. Go back to present. Can I try something? Is it because of the automatic monitor?
Oh.
Go back to that. We'll be 1 second and then we have to get the right thing in the right, I don't know which is which. My guess is that's the screen up there.
Just run it as a slideshow.
Yep, we have 3 different screens up and running. One is for, there we go. That'll work. Yep, there we go. And this, let me just make sure that this is,
I'm not using that.
nope, all right, so you can just use the buttons there.
Right.
All right, there
Thank
you go. Thank you. Pardon that for a moment. All right.
Okay. That doesn't work. Different, no, I'm,
Oh, okay.
Glasses.
Okay,
Have
that.
to get the
that I
other
can't help you
glasses.
with. That's on you.
there we go. There has been some very recent activity at the Indian Hills site, which I will review for the benefit of all of us. And then I will report on some research done in 2011 and 12, which is just being reported for the first time today. The city of Rossford in northwest Ohio last year located 5 potential Native American features using a geophysical survey during an elected review process required before development of the grounds currently occupied by an elementary school. The school is the Indian Hills School. It got its name from the historic native village dating back to 1600. The school has been vacant since 2014. In 2020, the city decided to address the empty building by either repurposing it, possibly as a senior citizen center, or demolishing it completely and building a park or a museum. The city officials discovered that the entire 39-acre plot of land was covered under the National Historic Preservation Act, and the NHPA requires federal and state agencies to identify and assess archaeological sites that their planned actions might affect. Rossford's development director decided to conduct a survey. The city hired Ohio Valley Archaeology Incorporated to conduct a geophysical survey of the 13 acres that are occupied, where the school is occupied. In October of 2021, Ohio Valley Archaeology found 5 anomalies in their surveying. The team will carry out archaeological excavation at the site on these anomalies when the spring thaw comes, and the next step will be to include tribal consultation with present-day tribes historically connected to the area. According to records from the Center for Historic and Military Archaeology at Tiffin, Ohio, the site of the Indian Hills, that's 33WO04, came to public attention in 1962 when children digging in the woods uncovered human remains in a mass grave holding as many as 40 individual skeletons. From then, archaeologists and looters unearthed another mass burial site holding at least 54 individuals. Over the years, a total of 10 mass burials were located on the property. And here's a drawing of one of the 1968 ossuary burials. An archaeologist from the Ohio History Connection said that the area was occupied by the Wyandot, who settled along the Maumee and Sandusky rivers. However, I am not aware of any archaeological evidence that the Wyandot were ever living on the Indian Hills site. Certainly not in the late 16th to mid-17th century, that's 1550 to 1650 AD, when the inhabitants of the Indian Hills site were the Assistaranon, as the Iroquois called them, and that means people at the end of the lake, and who were later called the Mascoutin of the Sandusky tradition, to whom the known archaeological remains actually belong. According to Elizabeth Tooker in the Handbook of North American Indians, Volume 15, the Wyandot were mainly remnants of the Huron and Petun after being attacked and destroyed by the Five Nation Iroquois in the attempt to gain the beaver trade. After their arrival in Detroit, after the Wyandots' arrival in Detroit around 1728, they hunted Sandusky River and Lower Maumee River areas. After some issues with the Ottawa, they settled in Sandusky, Ohio in 1738, eventually moving up to Upper Sandusky. The Mascoutin of the Sandusky tradition, who actually were on the site in that 1550 to 1650 period, left Rossford around 1650 and moved westward towards Illinois and Wisconsin. The Indian Hills phase of the Sandusky tradition represents the enigmatic Assistarian, who are reported by French priests to have been at war in the 1640s with the neutral Indians during the protohistoric period. The Indian Hills site is reported in the two-volume, 568-page 1984 master's dissertation of James Graves, student who was working with Dr. Stothers at the University of Toledo. Dr. Stothers had rather stringent requests of his students. The Indian Hills site in Rossford, Ohio, was, according to Dr. Timothy Abel in his article, The Context of Late Prehistoric and Protohistoric Trade in Northwest Ohio, in Volume 2 of Archaeology of North Central Ohio, for which I'm the editor, was the largest village of the Sandusky tradition. The 1550 to 1650 AD late prehistoric and protohistoric Algonquin village of the Sandusky tradition was a triple palisaded earthwork enclosed site and occupied more than the 39 acres. The Sandusky tradition originated in the Ohio Huron River drainage and pushed westward into the Maumee River area around 11 to 1200 AD. Thus, some artifacts at the Indian Hills site are of Iroquoian Western Basin tradition or neutral origin because of trade or because the Sandusky tradition culture adopted or merged with others as they spread. The Sandusky tradition adopted aspects from the Mississippian culture, primarily evidenced by the adoption of shell tempering in their ceramics. Now for reporting on the activity of 2011 and 12. The recovery of items claimed to be stolen from the Jacks Walters ossuary provided a radiocarbon date. However, only one burnt bone was in the evidence, so the claim that the artifacts were from an ossuary seemed to be questionable. Am I still on the first slide? I got two other slides. That's the volume 15 of Archaeology of North American Indians. And that's the dissertation of Mr. Graves. Now for reporting, it's questionable whether the artifacts that were recovered were actually from the ossuary as claimed. The sample, however, was run, and the material obtained was from the sample was from a resit on one of the rim shirts. The result was a date of 340 plus or minus 30 BP or 1610 AD. This verifies the artifacts are from the same time period as the Indian Hills site. These are the artifacts from that supposed ossuary. Bone samples from two habitation burials features containing pipe samples were run to verify earlier charcoal dates from these Indian Hills features. The site had been earlier dated by the presence of flush-eye beads, which provided a date between 1580 to 1615 AD, and which had been dated by charcoal from the feature in which they were found at 1610 AD. Here's the flush-eye beads. The burial sample number 1 was from burial 4, feature 371, which was by the house floor 2, and consisted of 5 individuals and contained Iroquoian coronet, pipe fragments, and copper rings. Sample number 1 was dated from the lumbar vertebrae and provided a date of 190 plus or minus 30 BP, a conventional age of 1570 plus or minus 30 AD. This corresponds into the dating of the site. And here is a drawing of the feature and the coronet pipe. Burial sample number 2 was from burial number 6, feature 78, in house floor number 4. The feature contained Iroquoian pipe fragments. The sample was taken from a long bone fragment. The sample provided a date of 130 BP with a conventional age of 1630 plus or minus 30 AD. Again, this corresponds to the dating of the site, and below is a drawing of that feature and another Iroquoian pipe. Finally, a bone sample from the LaSalle ossuary site near the Indian Village site and thought to be part of the activity of the Indian Hill site was sent for a date. The result was 160 plus or minus BP, conventional age of 1680, and this is, I believe, is the only date for the LaSalle ossuary. The LaSalle ossuary is 33W042. In 2009, I found some material in the University of Toledo lab, for which I was the lab coordinator from 2006 to 14. One of the 2 boxes had artifacts that had been washed and sorted. Another box had unwashed artifacts. Both boxes that had been excavated were from Indian Hills sometime around 1987-88. They were never included in the James Graves dissertation. These were washed and bagged, and these artifacts are the highlights of this material is presented below. This is from Area 2, Unit 2, midden layer, and there are other units as well. The ceramics of the Sandusky tradition, Indian Hills shell tempered, are the rim sherds on all of these next slides. What was thought to be earlier some cord wrapped stick rim sherds of the Western Basin tradition type, that was proved inaccurate. Here's one of the Unit 2S Min artifacts. What's important here is the copper. There's a small copper bead down in the lower left, and the tinkling cone in the center on the second layer up is either a tinkling cone or a hair pipe, possibly. There are two partial biface points. There is a bone, engraved bone piece broken off from some device, and then there's a ceramic bead down in the far right. S2 midden layer pipe. There's a pipe stem there, two views of it, and also a pipe bowl. S2 midden layer ceramics. The upper left, about midway in the center of a lower area there, you can see, is where the a strap handle was attached. Area S, Unit 2, F1 ceramics. Area 2, Unit 2, F1, a large amble stone. Areas S, rims and biface point. You can see that they're everything's shell tempered. Area S, Unit 1L, rim sherds. Area S, Unit 1L, two pipe fragments and two biface points. Area S, Unit 1L, work stone. These stones were all worked. S3 midden layer ceramics. That center piece there, I have it in my pocket for people who might want to look at it later, because it's a near 90-degree angle turn rim sherd, which I've never seen anything like it before. S3 midden workstone, again, artifacts. Area S, Unit 4, F1, ceramic rim sherd. Unit W5, S5, a knife. Unit W5, S5, rim sherds. And this is a sample of the that we have as our sample for Indian Hills ceramics. And you can see in the upper left is Indian Hills festoon variety, and on the right is the Indian Hills stamped variety. Right, upper and lower, and the middle piece on the low is from the stamp variety.
About 2 minutes.
Conclusions. The previous slides indicate that an Indian Hills variety of ceramics were predominated, but several other rim sherds were present, some plain, some that were cord marked all the way to the rim. The triangular points were 5 triangular points were in evidence. Ceramic, a bone, and a copper bead were all present. Copper tinkling cone or hair pipe was found, and a number of work stone items were present, including a large amble stone. Most importantly, 4 radiocarbon dates were obtained, verifying earlier dates for burials with the Iroquoian pipe fragments present, and another set of artifacts on the site. That's the Jack Walters material, and also a date was obtained for the LaSalle ossuary. Again, thank you.
Thank you. Leanna, you're up next, right? I just, yeah, it's looking right at them. Are you okay to present from here? Or do you want me to download them as PowerPoint?
You can download.
Oh, we're gonna have to, I think.
Can I just use the keyboard? to press
Yes,
them?
it seems like that would be the
This thing
best.
looks scary.
It's not scary, but it's not been consistently working. So I should down. This is a big file. I didn't realize it's gonna take a moment.
There's lots of pictures.
That's all right. We are doing fine. This will take just 6 whole minutes to download. I'm surprised it wouldn't play it right out of the. This is gonna take a moment.
I did bring it on a jump too.
If you have it, why don't you bring that? I think that's gonna take less time than this.
Well, let everyone know there's 4 o'clock and you come back if you want us to.
Yes, thank you. So I think I just took out that scary thing, just pop it right in there, and then we should be able to run it right from your drive. So we'll be up and running in just a moment, folks. Reading it.
Here we go.
There we go.
Didn't like that part.
All right, which one, or is it this one here?
Yes.
That is a big file. It'll work. It's all fine.
I loaded a bunch of my illustrations in there, so this might get really big.
All right, well, we will keep working on this, and if it takes too long to download, we might switch to papers and let it continue to download while someone else presents. Oh, there we go. All right. We'll just go ahead and put you in slideshow. All right, it worked. Take it away, Leanna. Thank you very much.
I am a student at the University of Maryland. I'm just finishing up my master's degree there, and this is my thesis research project.
And can you speak up just a bit?
I apologize that we didn't get a microphone in this room. Those are things we've learned for next time. So just project and it will be fine.
Yep. All right. So this is my thesis research project. I'm a student at the University of Maryland, just finishing up my degree in cultural heritage resource management. So my project was inspired by a small collection of artifacts that were collected by a family on their historic farmstead. These are some of the things they collected from their farmstead just over the years as they were plowing the land. We have pestles, we have lots of points, a full grooved maul, axes, and they'd just been collecting this stuff and kind of throwing it in a box and never really thought much of it. This site is located in Hamilton County, Ohio, extreme southwest portion of the state. And it's situated on a summit over the Great Miami River at about 720-foot elevation. I call this site Wesselmann Farm, and it's a newly discovered pre-contact site that radiocarbon dates to the early late Archaic period with ephemeral early Archaic and early woodland components. The landowner's collection, the geophysical survey, graciously conducted by Jared Burks, the artifact analysis interpretation, the archaeological investigation, radiocarbon dating, and research on the Ohio Archaeological Inventory and the Cincinnati Museum Center all contributed to this project. This was all piloted by myself and anyone that was gracious enough to help me because it ended up evolving into a much bigger project the more I got into it. So the geophysical survey is what really launched off the effort to do any kind of archaeological investigation. At first, I was just going to focus on the family's collection, but after doing the survey, I could not resist doing a little bit of excavation. So the magnetic survey encompassed about 3.7 acres. And from that survey, approximately 322 anomalies were discovered clustering in an area about 1.35 acres. These anomalies, before we tested them, they could have been non-cultural, cultural. You just don't really know until you test them. So for my archaeological investigation, I opened up 2 small units, about 2 meters by 3 meters each, and they were intended to capture either all or a portion of the anomalies. I just wanted to attest kind of as many as I could without really disturbing the ground very much. So in my 2 units, they captured portions of 3 anomalies, and within those 3 anomalies, they ended up being 6 different pit features and included 1 dog burial. So just to give a little bit of a visual, because I'm all about visuals. Unit 1 had 1 anomaly and ended up being 1 feature. Unit 2 was a lot more complicated. I dug into 2 different anomalies. One ended up being 3 pit features and the other 2 pit features, and then also included the dog burial. Just a quick breakdown of all my features. Feature 1 is a possible storage pit, low density refuse containing debris from fire or cooking features, napping waste and food waste, and carbonized nut haul from this feature dated to 4080 BP. Feature 2A is a refuse pit to dispose of waste produced by the creation, use, and maintenance of cooking features and possibly nearby earth ovens. Feature 2B is likely to be a refuse pit for the waste materials produced from cooking and processing activities. Feature 2C is the base of an oven, and wood charcoal dated from this feature to 4,330 BP. Feature 3A is a refuse pit for waste created from maintenance and use of cooking features and earth ovens, and carbonized nut haul from this feature dated to 4,120 BP. The dog burial was within the base of feature 3A, and a humerus bone sent for testing fetched a radiocarbon date of 4,100 BP. Feature 3C is an unknown feature type. It was also likely a refuse pit, maybe an oven before then, but carbonized nut haul from this one dated to 4,110 BP. The excavation recovered a variety of artifacts, which is kind of surprising for a late archaic site, but I had a wide variety of artifacts from the site. And those included archaic point types, groundstone tools, chipstone tools, flake drills, flake tools, a carapace bowl and fragments, polished and perforated bone objects such as awls, needles, and a shuttle, debitage, burned and unburned faunal remains. In all, less than 0.01% of the anomalies, approximately, identified on the geophysical survey have been excavated, and that very small percentage produced approximately 8,592 artifacts, numerous botanical samples, hundreds of pounds of FCR, and burned limestone. And tons of soil bags that I have yet to get through. They're going to go to the museum center. Hopefully I'll get to those in a couple months, but... So these are just some pictures of some of the artifacts that were recovered between all the pit features. They're not organized by pit feature. This is just a representative sample. McQuinney point types were the most commonly point by far found. We have a Brewerton point. Right underneath that is a tiny little piece of a bone bead. The center is a carapace bowl that I tried my best to piece back together. A polished perforated bone shuttle in the top corner, and the bottom is possibly a lithic anvil, a nutting stone, probably also used as a braider, a polished bone pin, and then a collection of stone tool drills. So some quick interpretations that I can make off the site are the radiocarbon dates, which are essential. I got 5 radiocarbon dates. They suggest the use of the site approximately 4,959 to 4,462 calibrated BP, which falls comfortably within the early late archaic period for Ohio. The intense midden development, superimposed features, and relatively contemporaneous carbon dates suggest that Wesselmann Farm was inhabited by small groups of people or family units. repeatedly occupying the site seasonally for as much as half a millennium. Most of the raw material represented in lithic assemblage can be found along the Great Miami and Ohio rivers, which suggests a regional or even local mobility range. And the artifact assemblage and radiocarbon dates from Wesselmann Farm are similar to those represented in other nearby regional sites. I'm sure many of you would recognize some of these sites. So Dravo Gravel is the closest in proximity to Wesselmann Farm. It's located approximately 2.5 miles downriver on the Great Miami. So map Wesselmann Farm at the top. Dravo Gravel is out in that little bulb there. Mount Nebo is just south of that. It's a regional base camp situated approximately 9.4 miles south of Wesselmann Farm along the Great Miami River. Mount Nebo is completely destroyed now, so it's not technically there anymore, but it was at one point. DuPont is a regional base camp and recognized as one of the largest late archaic sites in Ohio, and the site is approximately 14.3 miles downriver from Wesselmann Farm. There's many other archaic sites within the region that could potentially be involved with Wesselmann Farm in some way. I discussed those further in my thesis, but we'll just kind of focus on these to give a good picture. So just a little bit about the archaic settlement system as we kind of know it. Let's go back here. Yeah. Current late archaic settlement theory for Southwest Ohio speculates that settlement strategy consisted of two types of base camps, a regional and a local. So a regional base camp is going to be a much larger base camp like DuPont, where people would congregate regionally and some would settle year round. A local base camp is a bit smaller, but still a pretty large site. People would come together on a local level, and I don't think would usually stay year round, so it's really more of a seasonal type of camp. And various smaller sites such as temporary camps or stations and seasonal settlements played supportive roles, such as resource extraction to support the larger base camps. Overall, base camps are thought to generally occur in lowland areas along waterways, and the smaller ancillary sites are predicted for the upland locations. So the discovery of Wesselmann Farm changes how we currently model the late archaic settlement system, or at least a little bit how we understand it. Wesselmann Farm has a lot of things in common with larger base camps, but it's not quite as large. The site is on a high summit, but has extensive midden development like a base camp. The site is not as large as known base camps such as Dravo Gravel and DuPont. The site was settled by a small group of people regularly and not a place where larger groups congregated. Excavations encountered no evidence that the site was used for a single extractive activity. So Wesselmann Farm is better characterized as a third type of base camp, a residential base camp, which I define a residential base camp as a site where smaller groups or family groups settle repeatedly, at least seasonally, contains midden development, and represents a wide range of activities. People may have congregated at local or regional base camps, but preferred to live independently. Wesselmann Farm would have provided safe overlook placement out of view from the activity below, and provide access to resource zones that were not within the vicinity of sites below. Overall, the discovery of Wesselmann Farm suggests that archaic sites may be more territorial than previously understood and function much more independently. And this is just a picture of one of my most complicated pits. C was the oven. The oven was at the bottom. It fetched, I think, the second oldest radiocarbon date I had, and then A and B are over top the oven. I think B is probably the latest one, but I don't have carbon dates for B or A because those were so mixed when we were excavating that I really couldn't tell the two apart until maybe down to the last two levels, and then we could see, oh, we had two pits. But that's what you get with archaic pits that are just filled with rock. So the data collected and preserved from Wesselmann Farm site plays an important role of contributing to our knowledge of late archaic lifeways and settlement patterns. The site represents one of few upland early late archaic period settlements discovered in extreme southwest Ohio with extensive midden development and intact features. The site's location suggests the role that upland landforms had on the late archaic settlement system strategy and adds to our knowledge of how archaic sites are dispersed throughout the Southwest Ohio region. And for the future of the Wesselmann Farm site, there is currently no plans to continue excavations at the site. It is the intent of the property owner and the family to preserve the site and maintain the area for its present use as a cattle pasture, which it has been on this historic 38-acre farmstead for nearly 80 years. This thesis provided the family with interpretable information that gives a history of their farmstead that they can connect to and appreciate. And there's just some random photos of the excavation. The dog burial. It did have a head. That's just, it came out the day before. It's just kind of how it happened. And then we had a rainy day, so it had to come out. The pit feature up in the kind of middle towards the right, that's how the features would present, usually as a cluster of burned limestone in the center. And so it's kind of made it easy to define, and until you had them clustered on top of each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's terrific. On time? Thank you, that was terrific.
I know mine's short, but
No, it was wonderful.
it was either going to be too short or too long.
No, always on time and publish it later. All right, and finally, this is you right here, right? Or did we already have it open?
I think we shut it.
Okay, I'll if you turn it onto presenter mode, it will look weird on the screen. It won't do it right. So can you do it this way without the presenter mode, or do you need to see?
I can try to remember the numbers that I wrote in my notes.
All right, sorry. Okay, and last but certainly not least, we have Kevin Nolan et al. Giving us perhaps our long-awaited rebuttal. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? All right. So I'm presenting today on behalf of a group of 11 scholars who are taking a deep dive into examining the evidential basis for Tankersley et al.'s claim that a comet exploded over Cincinnati in the 3rd or 4th century AD and led to the end of the Hopewell and triggering a massive social decline, which there was no prior evidence for anyway. So this is part of a trend. There's actually a comet research group that they publish a bunch of papers about how comets ended everything. There's, I think, like 70 people in the group. And so everybody's probably heard of the Younger Dryas climate or comet that supposedly happened. They've got the one in the Jordan Valley that also supposedly happened and may have been documented in the Bible according to their interpretation. But when people start to look into these and other people independently assess the evidence, alternative explanations pop up, or when digging into the details of the evidence presented, it doesn't actually support the arguments that they make. So Dalton et al. Has published a couple of papers and says that they're misidentifying their nanodiamonds and their spheres in those papers. That's a picture of some of their spheres. Similar pictures are in the 2022 article as well. Other authors are finding that there are alternative explanations for the chemical signatures that they're presenting, claiming that they are extraterrestrial. But if there was a comet, we should have widespread evidence of this. There have been more than a few Hopewell excavations, and none of them have found any evidence in the past for this cataclysmic end to Hopewell. So it's no evidence in anybody else's research that something like this event happened. We're going to review some errors that they make four kind of categories: mischaracterizing previous research, stitching together distinct context into a whole cloth narrative that supports their intended conclusion, poor chronological analysis, and geochemical equifinality. Only going to really have time to deal with the first two, but similar to the other ones, the geochemistry, they did not explore alternative explanations for their measurements, and their measurements don't match what you would expect for that type of an event, but we'll address that later. So this is an extraordinary claim, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. We get vague evidence, poorly presented, and so there really is no support for a comet airburst either in their article or the previous body of Hopewell scholarship that preceded it. So the Turner site is central to their explanation, ground zero for the explosion. And they claim that there were post holes and burnt areas within the great enclosure. And they cite Willoughby. They don't give detailed citations for this or many of the other claims. Some of the claims they don't cite at all. And so the only thing that we're aware of that mentions this.
Yeah, if you, that little green light.
Yeah. So over here, we've got a couple of small burnt areas that are in the area that's otherwise generally a cemetery, and deposits of ash that are about 2 feet by 3 feet, clearly not structures, but also not where they were actually doing their, where they did their analysis. But so misinterpreting this previous investigation. So this is the figure of the Turner site from their article, figure 2, and they show their location of their sampling on the east side of the ditch, right next to the graded way, and then they present their profile, and they claim that they found evidence of a village, and Metz does map a village up here, right on the terrace edge, which would be probably about there in this this image, but that's not where they sampled theirs. Oops, went the wrong way. So where is their village that they claim to have refound? So table S1 in the supplementary material presents the coordinates, decimal degrees, to 5 decimal places for all of their sample locations. So with that many decimals, you should be about 1 to 2 meter precision. Well, those coordinates place their sample, that green dot, on the opposite side of the drainage ditch than where they showed it in the picture. It's about 60 meters away. The village would be about here. So I did a quick geo-reference of the Metz map to show how that would be organized on the site. And so where they place their unit in the graphic in the article matches closer to the image in their article. They don't source it, they don't cite it, but it's apparently closer to the Willoughby image, and that would be 200 meters south of where their coordinates are, approximately. So we have 3 different locations that they talk about having potentially sampled. None of them are in the place where Willoughby talked about the burnt areas, and there's no connection between the evidence for potential habitation debris and their climate or comet proxy data. They also mentioned that there was a veritable kitchen midden in Mound 1 at the Turner site. And so again, go back to Willoughby, and Willoughby describes it as certain portions of the mound consisted of refuse material, and throughout the earthwork were many animal bones, potsherds, broken bone awls, flint chips, bits of mica, and pieces of burnt clay. Not carbonized habitation surfaces, not fire-hardened house floors. This is fairly standard mound fill and scattered throughout the mound. And also not close to where they took their sample, any of the locations that they supposedly sampled. Then moving on to the Jennison Guard site, this map of their location is actually fairly good, and it matches with the coordinates that they put in the article. But they don't present a lot of detail on what they did. They did some excavations out there, but they don't cite the original reports. They don't include excavation information. And one, they clearly are implying that this charcoal impregnated clay sample comes from this profile, but it doesn't. It actually comes from a different excavation unit, and is clearly shown in their technical reports that are in the Indiana SHPO's database. And so Kevin Schwartz went and downloaded them and digested those. So on the left, we have a picture from the final report summarizing their 2019 and 2020 field work, showing Unit A, the 1 by 1 meter unit, and very clearly there's that charcoal impregnated clay sample coming out of that. The profile, the deep profile, is on the right, and that is their 1 by 2 meter Unit B, they freely mix those two contacts in their published paper, and so they're implying that is from that is from the same context where they did their platinum and iridium samples. But then even later, they also say that that's below the habitation level of the Hopewell occupation in Unit B. So in their own article, it's in 3 different places. Then they also go on to say that there was evidence of burned Hopewell structures, plural, that had been swept into piles of carbonized timbers of thatch, fire-hardened daub, and thermally damaged artifacts. Okay, we should see large timbers. We should see fire-hardened daub, fire-hardened surfaces. Well, this picture here is from the 2021 final report, showing the figures mislabeled because it says it's their 1 by 2, but this looks like a 1 by 1. But it says this is their terminal Hopewell midden, the bottom of the Hopewell occupation in their presumably 2019 excavation unit. I don't see any burned daub. I don't see any timbers. I hardly see any charcoal at all in the picture. There is, I don't know if anybody can really see it, but right there is an orange spot that may be burned earth, or it may be some ceramics. And so none of those things are present in the evidence that they present. Here's a profile of Unit B. And again, there are no burned timbers. There is no burned daub. There's no burned earth, but there are a couple of pieces of charcoal throughout here. I can't actually find them. Yeah. Oh, right there, there's another little orange speck that could be fragments of burned earth. But this is the evidence that they present in their technical report. This is, if they have the evidence of these timbers, they should be showing them. And I'm going backwards again. And there's another one, and again, you can see that, there's a couple of specks of charcoal throughout this, some possible flecks of burnt earth, but no timbers, no burned thatch, no fire-hardened daub, no fire-hardened habitation surfaces. So the evidence that they say is supporting their conclusion that this catastrophe happened is not present. There's also some minor issues in the organization and presentation of their data in the supplementary material. There are mislabeled things. There are inconsistently labeled things. So that layer where they try to say that large chunk of carbon came from in the tall profile, the deep profile, they say that area is pre-habitation when they're talking about the artifacts, but when they're talking about their soil descriptions and their platinum and iridium, they date it at the same time as the Hopewell occupation. So I don't know which one is correct, but they presented it both ways. It is Hopewell and it's before Hopewell, and it is the airburst layer and it isn't. Going down to Kentucky, Indian Fort Mountain, and now my favorite landform in the world. I want to go there and walk along that bird ridge. This is a site that has seen not much archaeological investigation In the 1920s, Burroughs did some excavation and mapped the walls, and that's what we see here in the middle is the enclosure walls that were intact at that time around the middle portion of this ridge. And then in the 1980s, this wall segment 7, Moore came in and did an excavation trench into that to explore that. They got some, and that's where the radiocarbon dates that they use in the article come from. Tankersley et al. Did not get their own radiocarbon dates for this. So it came from this wall, and that's kind of where it looks like their sample is coming from. It's at least showing up in the right place. But this is where the coordinates are. It's almost 3 kilometers away. And so I don't know what that is, but there is another site that was investigated at the same time that Burroughs did the Indian Fort Mountain investigation. There was a mound that was excavated, and that's where we can find the only Hopewell-like artifacts came from. There were no Hopewell artifacts discovered in the embankment that Moore excavated. And that mound was about 2.5 miles away. So maybe that's what these coordinates are. Maybe not. I don't know. So zooming in, and I apologize for not centering their data. I just wanted to have that ridge in the map. So down here, the white line is the remnant of wall 7. And the big gray circle is our approximation of where that dot shows up. And so that does include wall 7. And then Matt Davidson went out to the site with Berea College archaeologist Boaton Anderson. And she was there when Tankersley was taking his sample. And so that's how we found out where that sample was taken, is that red dot that is at the edge of their dot and not on the wall, inside the enclosure. And so probably a natural surface, not related to the construction of the embankment wall, no relation to the radiocarbon dates that were recovered in process from the embankment wall, and that they used to date their platinum and iridium samples that don't come from there. And so there's no connection between the context that they sampled and the data that they're using to support their argument. It took me a really long time, or I spent a long time trying to understand what's going on with this profile. Well, first of all, that's not a soil profile. Those are 4 pictures of sediment that are stacked on top of each other. So I don't know what that is. And maybe because they were only doing coring, they were trying to recreate Moore's stratigraphy. And so here are the profiles from Moore's report. And I can find no combination of the fill layers in Moore's profiles that would match that. So I decided to go back to their supplementary table where they describe the soils. And I tried to color code it here a little bit. They describe the topsoil as brown, not black. They describe the first layer of the subsoil as pink, not dark brown. They describe the next 2 layers as very dark brown, not orange and tan. And so it doesn't have any relation to the sediments that are in the embankment wall fill. It doesn't have any relationship to the sediments that they describe in their supplementary material. I have no idea what it is. All right. And 7 centimeters is in a lot of places. The top layer ends at 7 centimeters. The second layer is 7 centimeters to 7 centimeters. The third layer is 7 to 9 centimeters. But then moving over to Marietta, they use a lot of information recovered by Nomi Grieber and Bill Pickard from the Capitolium Mound, which is there in their graphics. But Tankersley et al. Don't show us in this where their samples actually came from. But the coordinates put it about 1 kilometer away in a different artificial construction. So no relationship to the prepared fire-hardened surface that Nomi and Bill found in the Capitolium Mound. Similar to an example, if you went to OHC over lunch, you could have seen what those fire-hardened surfaces actually look like. And so there's no relationship between the dates that they use from Grieber and Pickard and their their samples. And so and we don't know in detail exactly what they sampled, but there's no reason to associate the measurements that they make and the previous evidence. At Junction, again, they are conflating different contexts. The only known artifacts that we're aware of were recovered by Squire and Davis from Mound E. They did their sample in enclosure A, which is about 160 meters away. And so they don't match. They're conflating these contexts. This one, we didn't do a deep dive on it, but they artificially darkened the bottom of this profile. They shaded that in, and they said there's charcoal there, but I can't see anything in there. I can tell that there's dirt behind the shading that they did. I can tell that it looks like there's a green leaf down here, but I can't see any of the soil. There's no fire-hardened surfaces. There's none of the evidence that they talk about. So they misinterpret the literature. They freely conflate contexts to stitch together their whole cloth narrative. The details of their presentation are vague and confused. They use poor quality and manipulated images, and their data presentation is inconsistent. So in conclusion, there is no evidence of a comet airburst over Cincinnati in the 3rd or 4th century AD. It did not cause a social decline, and this article really should not have passed peer review and should not have been published. Thank you.
Well done. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. This part concludes our presentations for the day. Whew, we've made it. Everyone take a deep sigh, a deep breath. I'm going to stop the live stream in just a moment. These will be archived on our YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch them. We will see if we can fix some of the audio quality issues that we had this morning or find some other workarounds. If you are a member, you can either stay here now and participate in the membership meeting that will start in about 10 minutes. If you're coming in live, there's a Zoom link if you are a member coming in remotely and want to get everything set up for that. If you're not a member, but you're eligible to do so, please become a member, and then you can sit through the business meeting next time, all right? There's a plug for that. We can sort you out. It's totally fine, so there's my plug for that. And I think with that, we will take about 10 minutes to kind of turn ourselves over and get ready for the business meeting. I'd like to thank everybody for being here. And again, thanks to Jessica for your help. Thanks to Jamie for your help. And thanks to Al for the behind the scenes help that he gave. I don't know where he went, but thank you, everybody. Well done. All right, we can go ahead and end the live stream.